Welcome back, baseball fans. The 1981-84 Fall League Draft. We have final draft results in. We have 256 players drafted. Of course, that doesn't mean we are complete. We don't have 640 players over 32 teams because certain teams improved players. So we have undrafted free agency for teams to cut players, find players to complete their 20-man roster. They may have 19, they may have 18, they may have 17. Some teams actually improve 3 guys to get to that. So this video, what we're going to do is we're going to just go through the 32 teams, and we're going to take a look at probably the most intriguing. I used to say what was their best pick, but I think in this time I'm just going to say the most interesting pick. I'm going to go with this analysis. Beginning at the top with St. Louis. And what I really like with St. Louis is that they went out and got 82 Bruce Hurst just to get him on the roster, knowing full well that they would replace this card before opening day with an 84 version. And then in 84, they drafted a great Sixto Lezcano card with a 277, 851 OPS. But the good news is he's still quality in 82. He's got a nice 82 card. So once the token round of the draft commences, the years of these players will flip. Lezcano will go to 82, and Hurst will go to 84, where he can pitch on 3 days rest, joining Bob Forsch at the front of the Cardinal rotation. You don't get much of a drop-off for Lezcano. So that's some pretty clever roster finagling for the Cardinals. Next up, the Seattle Mariners. An interesting part of this draft, really there was 2 guys. When they looked for a relief pitcher out of 82, the top whip reliever was Chico Escarrega. They got him. But the interesting thing is, the 82 Dave Kingman card statistically is worse than his 84 card, except when you have him exclusively against lefties. The 204, 432 slugging turns into a 550 slugging. So that's pretty opportunistic to just get him against lefties. Dodgers next. I think with this draft, with the Dodgers, there's a couple of interesting things. One is, obviously, Hershiser becomes like the prize of the pitching staff for the 1980s, but they added Mike Marshall, knowing full well that Steve Garvey's still on the team. That's sort of how it happened anyway. It took a while for Marshall to start. But they also have Tim Wallach, who they got in free agency, and they are the first baseman and third baseman of this version of the Dodgers' future, as Ron Cey and Garvey are on their way out. Vegas, I think what they're going to do is, with this team, is they traded for Manny Trio to get back to their old ways of a 1 in the infield at second base, something they did in the early 70s version. But it cost them Carney Lansford in the deal. And they put Bunbury in an 82 card, which is not very desirable. So what they might end up doing is flipping Trio and Bunbury into different years. Get Bunbury in a better batting average of 81. Manny Trio is a 186 in 82. That's pretty cool. So that's what Las Vegas is probably up to. All right, Boston. This is pretty cool. The year of 81 was the unknown. They knew what they were going to do in the other 4 years. But in 81, they brought Tony Perez back just against lefties. He's great against lefties. Don't know why he was put on waivers by Arizona Diamondbacks previously. And then they just needed an extra offensive player. It didn't matter where you could put him on the roster. Infield, outfield, catcher, didn't matter. They were that deep. Miguel Delaney is an intriguing option in Boston as a double-A stealer. Guy you can stick at the top of the lineup just to see what happens if you give the Red Sox a base stealer. We'll see how that goes with Miguel Delaney. Next up, the Twins. The Twins, I got to go simply with Frank Viola. Because if anything, it puts that mark of the World Series team in 1987 out there. They have Urbic. They still have Bronanski for now. They also kept Roy Smalley instead of letting him go away to the New York Yankees. So I like Viola for the Twins as their first pick. New York Mets, same thing. I love their first pick. Who wouldn't? It's Dwight Gooden. it really overshadows everything else they did. It's Dwight Gooden and 7 other dudes. But of the 7 other dudes, one of the interesting things they did is they improved Frank Tanana, who we thought was just a bridge player with 81. We thought they were going to let him go, cut him. No. Instead, they improved him to his 84 card. So Gooden and Tanana are 1 and 2, and Tanana just might stick around here, even with Sid Fernandez and Ron Darling potentially joining a rotation that will lose Craig Swan and Rick Russell, who become the new bridge players for the Mets. How about the Tigers? This is a team that has been snubbed for that World Series because of the Ohio players, and now the Expos and the Ohio players just won the last 2 World Series. So this whole draft is about getting that 1984 World Championship. Willie Hernandez, Alan Trammell, Johnny Grubb's 84 card. They got Dave Bergman, Juan Berenguer. But here's the whole best card they got. Maybe in the previous video I mentioned, the Phillies had enough of Tug McGraw, and the Tigers, who in the 69-72 World Series, it was the Tigers against the Mets, and Tug McGraw beat them in a Game 5. Well, flash forward 12 years into the future, Tug McGraw and Jerry Koosman are now Detroit Tigers. How about that? What comes around goes around. So they're hoping Tug McGraw will assist Willie Hernandez in the bullpen, and Jerry Koosman is the lefty in the starting rotation. Tug McGraw, Jerry Koosman, and Willie Hernandez are the 3 left-handed pitchers for the Tigers. Trying to get a World Series. They'll have multiple cracks at it, by the way, because it's 81 to 84. I mean, they know they win that World Series in 84. All right. Easily the most intriguing, maybe not best, but the most intriguing player in this Pirate draft class. This is a team that's, frankly, folks, on the skids. They've already sort of capsized into that malaise that lasts until Barry Bonds shows up, and then it goes into another malaise. But any event, the smart thing this team has done is at least improve their players internally. Johnny Ray to a 312 hitter, Don Slaught to a 312 hitter. But the most intriguing player is finding Von Hayes. His stats aren't very good. He's at 81. This is his first year. He's with Cleveland. Hits 257. He gets traded to Philadelphia, but the Pirates are still feeling the blow of losing Lee Lacy in free agency. Lee Lacy was stolen away from them. They don't get Lee Lacy. So they'll have Von Hayes with a nice future coming up in the years of 82, 83, 84. So Von Hayes is a pretty darn good replacement in the future for Lee Lacy. So they might even do that now. They have a lot of holes to fill in this roster. But Von Hayes will be an everyday player somewhere in this lineup. Colorado Rockies. Interesting draft. They're all kind of all over the place with this thing. Some of the new faces, the new blood on this team, this is sort of like a case of the new blood. Dwayne Walker's a great platoon player. Ed Lynch was the top, had the lowest ERA of all pitchers taken out of 81 in free agency. And Mark Thurman goes in the rotation. It's hard to pick out what is the best part of this Colorado draft. Texas Rangers. You know, Texas is just rolling it back. They were very passive in this draft, deciding to keep all their players they had previously, which was Bell, Rivers, Matlack, Medich. And frankly, I guess the best addition might be this Mike Davis guy in 83, who simply has his best year of his career in that year. He gets to be the heir apparent in center field for the time being, as Mickey Rivers is now a corner outfielder. Florida Marlins. There's a nice pick in this lot here for the Florida Marlins. It is the 82 Manny Sarmiento. Again, another Pirate player that didn't end up in Pittsburgh. Sarmiento was the top starter free agent and 82 on the board. 3.39 ERA for Manny Sarmiento, and the whip is 1.209. That's a really nice card for Manny Sarmiento for Florida. Baltimore Orioles. Just a typical kind of Baltimore draft. Looking at all the additions and so forth, I just got to lean on the top pick, Mike Boddicker, just because he's a 20-game winner who wasn't even part of the continuation of... Remember, in 1980, they had Steve Stone, who the Orioles, the carryover Orioles, didn't even want or need. They let him go to Arizona. But they did have 80 Flanagan and 80 McGregor that they improved. So they just promoted a guy within, Mike Boddicker, to win 20 games for him, joining Jim Palmer at the top of that rotation with McGregor and Dennis Martinez, putting Mike Flanagan in the bullpen because Flanagan only had 125 innings. He had an injury in 1983. He gets to go to the bullpen and sort himself out. All right, the Padres are just killing this draft. This is a scary-looking team in the National League West, which is taking over as the best division in the National League because Houston, the Dodgers, the Padres, Giants, they've all really retooled nicely. I mean, I just got to go with Tony Gwynn, obviously, to get a 351 batted Tony Gwynn, you know. And from there, I mean, obviously there's plenty of other great stuff happening. The slugging Carlo Martinez, the great defense of Kevin McReynolds, Joe LaFay in the platoon. They sent Salazar over to the Cubs for Carney Lansford. That was a huge move as well. But Tony Gwynn for the Padres. The Expos. You know, this turned out to be a draft that started just okay, and then they got really clever at the end of it. I want to focus on these two guys from 84. For some reason, 84 was actually leaned to the Montreal Expos, so we didn't know where they were going to go, but fortunately, they looked on the street and they found this really unique situation where two 1980 players, Bob Lacey and Jim Wolford, could not make waivers because they didn't play in 1981. So they wound up basically hidden on the retirement list. And the Expos needed a lefty reliever, so they got Bob Lacey, and they needed an outfielder, so they got Jim Wolford. Jim Wolford actually was an Expo, hitting 300, 1984. So 4-year contracts for guys who were pulled out of retirement. And frankly, retirement is probably not the best word to use. They didn't participate in the first year of the timeline, is the equalizing statement. So that's what retirement means. You don't have a card for Strat-O-Matic in the year of 1981, whether you played in Major League Baseball or not. That's how you get on the retired list. Next up, the White Sox. You know, with this draft, there's some clever stuff. They're patterning themselves out after the 83 playoff team. But frankly, the best player here, I got to go to Harold Baines, getting improved to the 84 card. Harold Baines, 903 OPS in 84, the year after their playoff appearance. He's the leader of this club. He's going to overshadow Carlton Fisk, Floyd Bannister, Britt Burns, Lamar Hoyt, Richard Dotson, all the other acquisitions. This is the Harold Baines team getting him. He's only 25 years old in 84. It seems like I always remember Harold Baines in his 30s, his whole career. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s. But he's only 25 in 84. The Hotlanta Braves. In this draft, they were able to get Juan Samuel, an intriguing player, away from the Phillies. A double-A Steeler shows up in Atlanta, and this is going to be an experiment with this horrific defense. The good news is Dave Stapleton was a Boston Red Sox, and he moved over from second to first, but he still has eligibility at second base with his 81 card. So he actually will be the default defensive, in air quotes, second baseman, while Samuel can be the DH. And that makes a lot of sense now. Samuel as a DH, where they didn't have a DH, of course, in traditional MLB. Toronto Blue Jays, a lot of the crappy early Blue Jays are gone. The Blue Jay players that turn into a playoff team by 85 are arriving. They've added George Taco Bell, Rance Mulliniks, Dave Collins. But I got to focus on a guy who really wasn't with Toronto, and that is Tom Niedenfuer. Stolen from the Dodgers, he becomes the stud closer that would precede, in this case, Tom Henke, who arrives in the 85-86 era for the Blue Jays. So he's the present Terminator with his 83 card. Theoretically, they could have Niedenfuer and Henke together in a couple years. That could be frightening. All right, next up, the Arizona Diamondbacks. Obviously, this draft dominated by Ryne Sandberg getting into his 84 card, considered one of the best cards in the whole timeline. Your 1E6 second baseman who hits 314 with homers, doubles, triples, can steal bases. He can do absolutely everything. He's 24 years old. And he is on Arizona, not the Cubs, which is going to infuriate Cubs fans out there, but that's how the carryover league worked. You have to consider that Sandberg didn't come up with the Cubs. He came up with the Phillies. So Arizona stole him from the Phillies and were, of course, unwilling to trade him to the Cubs. Next up, the Kansas City Royals. Interesting draft for them. They covered a lot of bases they needed to do. But looking at the most intriguing player on this list, in a surprise, I'm going to call it Ken Phelps, a platoon player, but plenty of left-handed pop and power added to a Kansas City team that wasn't traditionally known for their left-handed pop and power. They have Brett and they have Willie Aikens, but Phelps adds a new dimension of your classic slugging, foot in the bucket, hacking it, put the shift on, walks, homer, strikeout guy. Ken Phelps for Kansas City. He was actually with Seattle, I think the Yankees, traditionally. So what did the Cubs do to save their draft? Well, it's a tough one here. But we can argue this for the Cubs. We have Claudell Washington in the best card of his career. We have Scott Sanderson in one of the best cards of his career. What was the extra reliever? Well, yeah, with the Cubs, they had a situation where they had no futures left-handed pitchers. And Tom Gorman is the lefty who gets lefties out, and Jack O'Connor goes to the rotation. So this Cub team still needs to do some work if they're going to be an 84 playoff team. It's going to be almost impossible to do without Ryne Sandberg, though. So they're going to have to find a different way of putting a playoff team together by 84. The Cubs and the Pirates have moved to the bottom of that division. It's going to be the Cardinals and the Reds at the top of that division. The timeline is 81 to 84. The Cardinals and the Reds had the best record in the National League in 1981 and were not invited to the playoffs. So my league is going to get closer to what actually may have happened, with the Cardinals and Reds expected to both go to the playoffs in the same division as a division winner and a wild card. California Angels. I think of all these picks, the one guy who stands out here is a newcomer, and that's Mark Langston. He's 23 years old. He was a Seattle Mariner. You get your weak sister plucked a really talented player. I think Langston also played for the Expos. But Langston's got a 136 whip with this card, a little high, but still. A lefty starter on a team that didn't have a tradition. They lost Jeff Zahn to the Twins, so I like Langston on the Angels. Milwaukee Brewers, they also are looking at a playoff window coming to a close soon, the 82 team. Of all the players they've added, I think I'm just going to go with the Ted Simmons. The trade didn't look good initially, as Simmons' production in St. Louis did not arrive in Milwaukee until 83. Ted Simmons has an absolutely nice 1983. 308, 799 OPS. That's the Ted Simmons they were hoping to get. And let's face it, they get the 83 card that you could plug in to Harvey's Wallbangers of that 82 World Series appearance. So maybe it's simply Ted Simmons is the missing ingredient to help that Brewer team win the 82 World Series versus St. Louis. A better Ted Simmons. All right, the Giants have absolutely smoked this draft. Again, one of the reasons why the National League West is looking like the best division in the sport. There are so many cool things about this draft for the Giants. Jack Clark's ridiculous year, Gladden's ridiculous year, Hamaker's fantastic year. All these cards I could flash up there, but I'm going to flash up this card. Bobby Mercer returns to the Bay Area at age 35 as a left-handed hitting DH who crushes homers versus righties. And that's all the Giants want. All they needed is a left-handed batter with no position. We have the DH in the National League, and Bobby Mercer fits like a glove returning to the Bay Area. They had their choice, by the way, of Bobby Bonds or Bobby Mercer, and they took Bobby Mercer. If you're wondering, Bobby Bonds ended up back in Cleveland, where he played in '79. Yankees, we just have to talk about Don Mattingly's arrival in '84. What a ridiculous second year in baseball. He's 23 years old, 207 hits, 343, 918 OPS, 186 at first base. Mattingly becomes the best player. And the good news for the Yankees and the bad news for conspiracy theorists who think I'm a Yankee fan, keeping Reggie Jackson in New York with his California stats for just one season. Yep. They're the Yankees. They do dirty stuff, so I'm sort of following along with the Yankees doing dirty stuff. They traded for Mike Easler as well, who was an Ohio player who hit over 300. So the Yankees they have no World Series appearances. Let me say that again. Since I've been doing the carryover league from 77 on, the Yankees have yet to go to a World Series. Boston's won one. Baltimore's won one. Okay? Yankees have nothing to show for it. So that should prove once and for all that, there's no courtesy going to the Yankees. All right, next up, Cleveland. In this draft, I got to go with Terry Francona, a 25-year-old player manager of the Cleveland Indians with a fantastic card, a 346 average in the magical year of 1984 for Terry Francona. It's a 4-year contract. He can hit lefties and righties well. He will dominate this team's roster. He arguably becomes their best player. Terry Francona, the best player manager the sport's ever seen. Next up, Portland. Not a big fan of the draft, though what we do like about this draft is the tried and true method of the guys on their keeper list. They found Jerry Royce, Terry Poole, and Chet Lemon's best final years of their careers to use. So that bodes well for Portland. Big Red Machine. All right. Okay, this is the last time I did a mixed card league featuring 81 to 84, the Reds. Well, they won it. And why did they win it? This happened a long time ago before YouTube. They won it because they had the best record in baseball in 1981, pretty simply. I think of all these picks that they made, one of the intriguing options was they took Concepcion's 82 card, which was fine, and they went back to his 81 card simply because the Reds had the best record in baseball in 81, and Concepcion, it's 306. So it's one of Dave Concepcion's best years of his career in that strike year. So I wanted to flash that card into our league for this one season, and then that card will, of course, expire next year. But I do want to get Concepcion's 81 card on the Cincinnati team that's expected to compete for the World Series. Next up, Oakland. With Oakland, it's simply their best player is Rickey Henderson. So we got him a 4-year deal. Henderson came up with Oakland in 79. We added him in 1980, ran that card out for 4 years, and promoted him to another 4-year contract in 1984. Don't care about the AAA to AA. It doesn't matter to me. AA is fine. But Rickey Henderson has 16 dingers. Really starts slugging. 458 slugger at the top of the spot, plus the walks and stolen bases. Had to go with that one. Houston had a really nice draft, but the guy I'm going to flash up here is intriguing, and that is Frank DePino, because Houston has added not 4, but they have 3 lefties, but they're all relievers, and they need a lefty starter. So they have DePino, they have Sambito, and Dan Boone, and they're going to have to figure out how to convert one of those pitchers to a starter. And that means that Dan Boone is on his way out, and that means that they're going to have to find a starting pitcher from either that year or move DePino back to his 83 card. So it's going to be some roster manipulation for Houston in the token round of the draft. We'll probably have, the next video will be the token round of the draft, and we'll probably do more of an explanation of that logic when it is more explainable, once they resolve their roster. So Houston's roster is in flux right now until they figure that out. They simply wanted to have DePino so nobody else could take him away from them. That was the strategy. All right, the Phillies, fun roster. Obviously the Jeff Stone, Lonnie Smith being teammates, part of the roster is pretty cool. But I got to focus on another year swap. At the top of this broadcast, we talked about the Cardinals were going to move Bruce Hurst and Sixto Lezcano into different years. The Phillies did a similar move. Once the 84 portion of the draft came up, they took 84 Harry Spillman, recognizing, though, he's better as a 1982 player. So when it came to the 82 portion of the draft, they selected Onyx Concepcion, knowing that his 84 season's better. So in undrafted free agency, the Cards will move into those years. The Concepcion will move into 84, Spillman will move into 82. That's 2 player improvements to make the Phillies better. Those are the type of moves you see in the token round of the draft. So, the Cardinals, the Phillies, and the Astros, they definitely are going to be making moves in the token round. And lastly, the Ohio players, just a great draft for them. Again, they won the World Series. They don't look worse for wear, really. Obviously, Mike Norris isn't going to be as good as he was in 1980. But the players they added, they got Ron Washington as a 300 hitting shortstop. That's nice, 294. Gary Matthews replaces Mike Easler. That's a fine replacement. 838 OPS for Matthews. But yeah, it's a good draft for the Ohio players. Can they run it back? We haven't had a repeat champion. We saw their division rival Detroit make a run at it roster-wise. So we'll see. But that takes us to undrafted free agency. We haven't set it up yet, but this is what undrafted free agency looked like a year ago. With first the players that in undrafted free agency a year ago, we had all these players had to be placed into new cards. If we go back to a draft, if we see this number with a slash and a new number there, those are all the players in undrafted free agency we'll have to replace. So looking at the top, when we see that number in column C here, we know that they'll have to be replaced in the token round of the draft. The first guy that we see is Tanana. Because we moved him into 84, it means they have to add a player from the year 81. That's how this is converted. And then the same thing with Geronimo. They turned his 81 card into an 82 card. They have to add an 81 player. And the Pirates have to add 3 players for Johnny Ray, Don Slaught, Bob Baylor, Colorado, Greg Pryor, Len Sakata in Baltimore, Tony Gwynn, LaFay, Billy Sample, etc. So that's part of the process, in addition to the other part of the process that we talked about with the Phillies, Houston, and the Cardinals. And the draft order for undrafted free agency is done by the quantity of tokens. Every team starts with 5 tokens. So regular draft order is the order. But then you look at final draft tokens. After all the tokens were spent in the trade carousel and in the draft, teams adding and subtracting to equalize trades. So you look at the top numbers here, and Seattle sticks out with an 8. They went +3. There might not even be a 7. Yeah, there's a 7. The Giants and Cleveland are at 7. So the way undrafted free agency will work is Seattle will have the first pick in the draft. Seattle will have the second pick in the draft. Giants 3rd. Cleveland 4th. And then the 6s would be Seattle again, but then you have the Dodgers, etc., etc. The one thing we do know is that the Tigers have spent 4 of their 5 tokens. This is to get Willie Hernandez, Tug McGraw. Who else did they add? I forget the other guy they added. Oh, Jerry Kuzman. They got 1 token left. Simply put, they have to wait till the end of the draft if they want to make any moves. So hopefully for the Tigers, they don't have to make any. So this will all be sorted in the token round of the draft video, which will be the next video. So with that, we're going to pause it right now. Hope you're enjoying these draft analysis. Thanks for checking this out. We'll see you next time.